Okay, so we're coming in on session 3, which is about the cells and motivating. So, like when they say the wind beneath your wings, right? So, we're kind of talking about what's getting us motivated, what's keeping us connected to our why, and what's kind of fueling that endurance. Okay, so we're going to be exploring what the true will is, right? Purpose, and it's often misunderstood as something that may be rebellious or sometimes viewed as selfishness, right? Especially when we start using the term of self-love, but it's really about divine alignment, right? Again, what your why is, what your purpose is, that inner knowing that you have when you feel like you're getting into your zone. And so that's where your authentic motivation comes from. We're moving from, it's a time when you're moving from pushing yourself forward, like, I must get through this by trying to meet external expectations. And you start to be actually propelled forward, kind of like when a bird is using the currents of the wind to soar, right? Instead of having to use that energy to actually fly to where they're going. But you're being propelled by your purpose, by that motivation, by that why, by that energetic flow. So this week is about the cells in the sailboat metaphor, okay? And the cells are powered by wind. And in this case, when we think of wind, we're thinking about that invisible energy, the things that you don't necessarily see. In the same way, because our motivation, our desires, and our inner vision are the winds of our personal growth. So this session is about learning how to harness that energy intentionally, because everything is about intentionality and in the way that feels fulfilling to you. So let's get our presentation up here really quick. Share my screen. Any questions that come up, just submit them under the video here. All right, that should be showing in the video. So activating our true will. When we're talking about the energy that's propelling our movement, our vision forward, every action, every decision is powered by either fear, something that we're afraid that's going to happen, something that we're afraid that's not going to happen, or something that aligns with our purpose. So we're either contracting, shrinking back, withdrawing into our comfort zone, or we're expanding and growing outside of that comfort zone, being able to take those calculated risks, right? So, what's the difference in the two? When you're thinking about, or when you're moving forward with fear, right? Afraid of what's going to happen or afraid of what might not happen, then you may be using phrases like, I have to, I should. If I don't, I'll lose, right? So emotionally, you're striving, you're hustling, or a lot of times people pleasing. You're doing things because you don't want this person to think this about you, or you don't want to let your caregivers, parents down, people who raised you. You don't want to let your mentors down, right? And so as long as you meet that goal and that meter, then that is a sign of success. And although it can be a sign of success for meeting that particular goal, it does not necessarily mean being fulfilled. It's just a way to avoid judgment or to avoid being seen as a failure, right? So you could end up feeling anxious. When you're supposed to be in a resting period, you still feel anxious. And resting can mean when you actually meet that goal and you have met that measure of success, but you're still feeling anxious. So the stillness that you're supposed to experience, it still feels like you haven't arrived, like you haven't um, come into your zone, like you haven't fulfilled what you want to fulfill. So that's that inner voice that's saying, I have to, I should do this. And if I don't do this, then I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose the respect of individuals. I'm going to lose my family, right? People are going to think this or people are going to think that. Um, I'm going to lose my connections, right? So um, when we're feeling like the wind is against us, right? Then it feels tighter, it feels more constricted, and nothing is moving smoothly. We got our ego, and our ego is trying to become worthy versus already knowing that we are worthy. Okay. So we're chasing. We use that a lot, right? Chasing this and chasing that. There's instability, perhaps. That instability ends up draining our energy, and so we feel pulled in all different types of directions. And then everything that we're doing is based on approval or fear of losing something. And that directly links us to being burned out, to operating in this ball of perfectionism and experiencing a lot of emotional exhaustion. Okay. So when fear is our wind, when that's fueling our sails, then we'll move, but imagine it moving in circles, right? You're not moving towards your destination and your goal. Now, when purpose is what's filling our sails, when that's the wind beneath our wings, right? Then we're moving forward from calm and clarity, not necessarily pressure. Although we know that we understand being in this place at this time and things that need to be built, right, in order to be steady and in order to take us into that next phase. So sometimes the effort might feel a little bit lighter or it feels in alignment. And so then when things are in alignment, that helps us to experience more meaningful spaces in our time, right? Even if things are getting hard, it's like, okay, this is part, this is part of that process. And we have a knowing that we can move forward through that process. And we start hearing things like, this feels right, right? We start affirming that we're growing and we push ourselves through and continue to motivate ourselves because we have a feeling that what we're doing, it matters. So in that way, the wind feels like it's with us, like it's flowing with us, right? The bird that's using the current of the wind to soar, right? And so, although there's action happening, it's not draining and it's not tiring us in the same way. So, when the wind is with us, we feel like, okay, things are moving in motion. That feeling of being in the zone, that feeling of being in alignment. We're no longer feeling like we're being forced, like we have to muster up the energy to get through, right? So you align with it and you catch what's already blowing. It's like there's a lot of, even if things are getting hard, there's a lot of confirmation along the way. Okay. So you recognize that your will, your effort, and how you feel about things, your inner knowing, right? Your values, those things are lining up and they're on the same current. That's when you experience that flow state, right? Your resilience starts to increase as well because meaning starts to replace fear as your fuel. So when purpose is filling your cells, life doesn't push you. You're being pulled along in a way, in a way that is at a pace that you understand, that you tolerate, and that you willingly participate in. So our willpower isn't about making wind, right? We're not making the wind is already there. So our willpower is about listening from where the wind already wants to take us. It's about paying attention to those currents and knowing how to use those currents, right? Instead of feeling knocked down by it, we know that if we're going against the wind, then we can make adjustments to flow with the wind and how might that look, right? So we can make plans again, being more intentional. So if you're thinking about the birds, the wind is calm. If it's calm or aggressive, they use the wind to their advantage when they're gliding around at certain altitudes, okay? They're not having to expend that extra energy in the moment. And this is the way with our environment. When we think about the things that we control and that we don't control, we learn to use those moments that we don't control to our advantage instead of expending energy that does not benefit, help the situation, move the situation along. Either energy can be preserved, right? Instead of wasting that energy, we can preserve it. We can refocus that energy. We can save it for a different time, right? Some things cannot be moved by us. The circumstances just need sometimes what they say about time solving things. Sometimes circumstances need a little time in order to have things loosen up a little bit, to have things move in a little bit of a way. Sometimes things just need time to resolve itself. So think of windmills creating electricity, okay? The external conditions that you don't control then becomes useful to you. When people say go with the flow, it's about opening your cells up and letting that environment become purposeful, right? So we'll talk about decision making and discernment in the next session, but that becomes important. Your rudder becomes important. So for discussion, in this case, you may be journaling, maybe you're talking with your therapist, social worker, peer group, but consider when was the last time you felt you were forcing life instead of flowing with it? What did that look like? What did that feel like? Did you make any adjustments because of it? How did you push through that? Also consider what it feels like when your actions come from joy or curiosity instead of fear. Does it feel impulsive? Does it feel like you're more in a flow state and in the zone? Do you feel more ready when you're making decisions? And your actions are coming from curiosity or joy instead of feeling pressured into a decision? And how can you tell? How is your body responding? How are your emotions responding? What's going on in your relationships when things feel like they're in alignment? Okay, for reflection, I do suggest these three things. Unfortunately, we were not able to have a live discussion today. I've had some individual discussions with people today, and so life comes up. No apologies needed. Don't worry about those things, okay? People apologize for not being able to make the meeting, but no apologies needed. Things are going to come up in life, okay? This is a commitment to yourself, not to me. So I like to discuss the nuances of personal growth and leaning into your self-love journey, because your new actions or maybe your inaction, right? Stopping certain actions that may feel harmful or in conflict with where you're moving now and what you're deciding to do now, those things may rub people in the wrong way, especially people who are the closest to you. Okay, it may take your focus away from areas that they were used to you showing up in before, even if those were unhealthy activities, unhealthy conversation, unhealthy situations and scenarios. It may trigger feelings in them too, what your new actions are, that they didn't even know that they had for whatever reason, right? And those are some of the things that you just don't control. I always try to tell people that the most conversation that we have is going to be about how people are reacting. And that's something that we can't control. It's something that we desire. We desire support. We desire understanding. We desire people to be on the same page with us, but it may not be the right timing for them. It may not be values that they align with. And so we have to allow that understanding in their situation as well, just in the same way that we're asking for understanding. Okay. A lot of times we see ego as being something that is self-centered or being arrogant, not considering anyone else. But acting out of fear, being impulsive, and requiring validation to be authentic, that originates from ego as well. And ego has its uses, its positives, and its negatives, right? So again, learning to be intentional and understanding where things are coming from can be a good use. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It is something that you have to exercise, something that you get used to. But as you are being more intentional, it does become second nature. It does become something that you start not to think about so much because you are changing your behavior pattern, and that behavior pattern becomes a new habit, right? They say it takes 21 days to make a new habit, make a new behavioral pattern. So count it out. I've done a couple of those things. And there's still things that happen now, even though I'm way beyond those 21 days. There's still things that happen. It's like, why did I do that? I knew better than to do that, right? So pivoting, making the adjustment at any time is always going to be appropriate. So how people are reacting, that's the feedback, right? Feedback from our external environment. And the feedback that matters most is always going to be the people who are closest to us. When we are being authentic and coming from an authentic place, doing what our true self, doing that what we want, okay, it can still be viewed as selfish, even though it's something that is going to be healthier, something that is going to be more in a flow state, something that is going to be a positive experience for us, does not automatically make it a positive experience for those who surround us. I cannot stress that enough, right? And so sometimes those opinions can be very difficult to deal with, but again, they are opinions, and there is something happening in that person's own ecosystem, in their own environment, and in their own experience, and things that they won't control about our experience. And now those experiences are colliding, right? So it's very possible that it can be received by other people as doing whatever you want to, and doing it without considering how they feel or how it changes them, how it changes their experience, how it changes their relationship. Okay. Now, I had the most conversation about other people, about how other people are feeling. They did this, they yelled at me, they hung up the phone on me, they told me this, they told me that. But an important thing to remember is that true will is in harmony with love, right? So even though it may be difficult for that person to understand, then that's why communication is so important. The people that are most important to you, you want to communicate with them. You want them to understand what's going on with you. And at first, that may not happen, right? But the space that love creates, it doesn't conflict, okay? What's within, or what's good for you, what's healthy for you, and what's good and what's healthy for them. Nobody likes change management, right? So change management, things not being the same are very uncomfortable. It does push us out of that comfort zone. But at the same time, when you want the best for yourself, and the folk who surround you want the best for you as well, then at some point there is a harmony with that. At some point there is a getting on to the program. There is a meshing of programs where two things can coexist at the same time without creating conflict, right? Does it mean that the relationship won't change? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Maybe there will be more time spent, maybe there will be less time spent. Maybe there will be growth, maybe there will be stagnation for a little bit, right? But again, those are the nuances of change. But at the end of the day, misunderstandings can be worked through, and discomfort can be aired out when we create those safe places to be able to interact with one another and express our feelings, right? Now, the hardest thing for everybody to get on board with is it's your job to deal with your feelings. It's not the other person. You gotta get into, well, why am I feeling this way? Why is this coming up? Why is this becoming a problem for me? Is it something that I'm not getting? Is it something that I'm uncomfortable with? Those are things that we have to deal with. And so again, that change management, that conflict at first is like, what? I have to deal with my own feelings. That may be the first time that that's even come up between you and the people in your environment. It may be something that you're dealing with, being able to deal with your own feelings. So time, patience, compassion, it's needed on the journey because there's going to be some type of change that you're going to be dealing with, right? So when all things are aligning with something of a higher nature, right? People are not wanting to stay stuck. People are not wanting to stay in negative energy. Then support will come, motion, movement will come. Okay. We start to move from the I have to do this and I have to do that. Well, I don't want to do this because this might happen, or, I gotta make sure I do this because such and such is going to be upset. And then we start to be moved to do things. We start to be moved to be in alignment with purpose, and we start to become comfortable in that. Some people have expressed becoming so comfortable with their alignment that they're okay with not having close connections with the people that they know in their environment. Sometimes we've only known these people in our environment, in our world, but the experience is much bigger than that. So as you start to expand your experience and expand your role, different things, different ideas are coming in, and you decide, maybe that's not for me, right? And people can take that, maybe that's not for me, right? These feelings are not something that I want all the time, as personal rejection. And so that's why communication can be a big piece when you're dealing with the people in your environment. Um, Following your will, following your purpose just sometimes feels like resistance. Okay. Sometimes feels like resistance. So there's gonna be uh this short-term energy. I have the two columns here, being in alignment with your values and your purpose. That's when you feel like, okay, I'm being supported, even if people don't particularly resonate with the same thing. You feel like there's resources that you have available to you, right? Maybe being offered to you, or things that you can access. You feel like you're being encouraged. You feel like you have community. And again, sometimes the community may not be the community that you started out with, the connections that you started out with. You may develop new connections that are more appropriate for your purpose and your will. When I say more appropriate, I mean they're aligning um, in a different way. Okay. Uh, you may feel like there's teamwork. When you're acting from fear and impulse, okay, or wanting to have validation, get validation, external validation from individuals, you may find yourself avoiding things. You may feel like you're walking on eggshells or not really sure what to say or do because you don't want to set this person off, right? But it seems like what you're doing and where you're going with your life and your purpose is not really meshing with this person or these people, right? Sometimes there can be that talking. People talk about game stalking and things of that sort. So sometimes there can be those kind of rumors. Sometimes it can be things like the gaslighting, right? Oh, this person has lost their mind. We'll say that in jest, right? Because why would they be doing something that they're not used to? Like, why was this not working before? And sometimes the why was this not working before is why this was working for me, why wasn't it working for you? You know? And so I don't mean to put it in terms of there being this opposition. It's just simply your purpose and their purpose, your vision and their vision is not flowing together. Can they coexist? Yes, they can. And it's up to each person, the amount of effort, the amount of intention that they want to pour into making that synchronicity happen. All right. But when we are flowing in our true purpose, our true will, then we're motivated by love. We have that compassion. We have that patience, right? We know when to back off. We know that the reaction may not have anything to do with us, and they may know that the reaction has nothing to do with us. And sometimes we understand. I say sometimes because it would be nice if all the time, but sometimes we understand that what someone has to do for themselves to be in a healthy place may not be convenient for us. Okay. So getting to that place of moving naturally and it being easy to move naturally, it may be a little bit bumpy at first. That's not something that's abnormal, because a lot of people, I'm doing something better for myself, but I'm experiencing more friction, more resistance, more back and forth with people. And sometimes that's part of the change management. Um, our purpose, okay, our inner knowing, who we feel we are, will definitely test our courage a lot, all the time. Okay. We restore our world, we connect, we feel the flow when we are reclaiming our purpose. Okay. And we stop letting fear steer us away from it. Maybe someone's never done this before. Maybe it's not going to make you a millionaire. I know right now there's a lot about money that goes on, especially about value. There's something in my eye, especially things about value, whether you should be valued as a person, right? Especially if you desire to like have a family or have a place in society, right? When it's a topic of conversation, what do you do is a simple question, but also assigns some type of value to us with people that we don't even know, right? It gives them a way to value or devalue us. So the moment we start speaking and living who we truly are, that's when we become a part of creating it, right? There are people who are landscape artists, landscape architectures, right? They do the yards and they've made money well. Whether people think well of them or not well of them, it's their love for what they're doing and the flow that they're experiencing that allows them to create this life that they're creating for themselves, right? There was this lady recently in the media, and she's 101 years old, and she is a restaurant owner, started a restaurant. I think she was in her 30s or so. And it's very well known in the neighborhood. And she has been involved with her restaurant since the time of opening. Even now, at 101 years old, she still goes in every day, making sure that the recipes are correct, that everything's being run correctly, right? And she has all her faculties about herself. Her coming to that 101-year-old stage in her life is about knowing what her purpose is and playing to that purpose every single day regardless of her family members. She knows this is my purpose. I want to cook. This is my ministry per se, right? This is my healing towards people. And so every day she has played into that purpose and it has sustained her. She has endured, right? There's not this feeling of cooking's not a big deal to her. Cooking is a big deal. It has no bearing what other people think if they think what she does is important or not important. Like I said, it's her ministry, right? So that's important to her. And that has kept her going all of this time. That's where she draws satisfaction from. So when we start to look at it from a positive psychology standpoint, it teaches us that authentic motivation is something that comes from our core values, something that comes from our inner knowing. So our will is that deep intrinsic current when what we do matches exactly who we are. That is the flow, right? So motivation gives us meaning, and that meaning leads us to mastery. So when action and identity are merging, that's when we become our best selves. I do talk about autonomy a lot as well with people, and people ask, well, what is autonomy? Autonomy is when you feel you have the skills to survive the weather in your life. You're cultivating your self-determination, and it's just a continuous cycle. Okay. So resilience, again, it is about bouncing back, but it's also knowing that you have the skill, right? When the weather is a little bit shaky, a little bit stormy, and even when it seems like things are not gonna fare very well, you don't lose your connection to your purpose. You don't lose your connection to your true will. I put this quote here from Viktor Frankl that those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Where there's a will, there's a way, right? So connected to true purpose, connected to true will, that gives you endurance. That gives you connection to your skills. That says, okay, maybe I've been through this before. Maybe I've been through something similar. Like it doesn't have to be the same thing, but I've been through something hard, right? And so meditation, taking time and space, finding the glimmers in life, Still engaging in the things that also bring you joy and happiness, even when you're experiencing things. Giving a time and a place to everything to be experienced is important to endurance as well. Okay. Once we become disconnected from that, think of it like if you had a line from a boat, right? Um, what is that called? Water skiing, right? You're connected to that line. If that line gets severed, you're kind of out there in the water by yourself. If you have some skills, right, you're like, okay, hold on. I can tread water, I can breaststroke, I can swim, right? And you go through the cycle of doing those things and applying those skills. But if you didn't think that you had those skills, or if you felt like those skills would not be able to get you back to the boat or get you back to that line of connection, then maybe you would just sink into the waters, right? Maybe you would panic. Maybe you would be concerned about everything else in the water and not make any effort towards reconnecting with that line, right? To get back to that line of safety. So it's little things like that. Those are the things that happen in our real lives. And before we know it, we're so disconnected from things. Um, we're not sure where we're going in life. We're not sure what we want to do in life. We're not sure if life even matters or has any value to us. But that value directly comes from our purpose. And that is being able to be in our true will. I hope that's making sense. So checking in. Sometimes checking in can go into overthinking, right? So quick check-ins, but not being afraid of checking in and checking in on your feelings, right? So the shell check-in. The check-in is just to reinforce that when there is resistance happening, that is not a sign of failure, okay? You're getting feedback on this journey of realignment, all right? So asking yourself, where am I forcing my way instead of flowing my way might be important, right? So a check-in is think about one area where you're feeling inflow right now, even if it's just about being able to have personal time to yourself, where that feels like, okay, I'm resetting, I'm recharging. Like what activity or vision makes you lose track of time and feel the most alive? That's a good indication of being in flow. Not the only indication, but it's a pretty good indication. Okay. And it's okay to know and to point out an area where resistance is showing up. In the next session, I'm going to talk about the reframing check-in that kind of goes with this. Once you are identifying areas of resistance, identifying areas of flow, but specifically for the areas of resistance, like what steps we can go through. And it's a 5-minute check-in to say, okay, what is it that I control here, don't control here? What do I want to address and I don't want to address? Pointing out the glimmers that are going well, pointing out the growth as well, because a lot of times we just focus on all the negative things that are happening. And we fail to realize the growth that's happening in our lives. We fail to realize the skills that we're building, okay, in this process. And both things are very important to your foundation. So when you're thinking about where's there one area of resistance showing up, then you can also think about, well, what small act today could align me with my purpose, my true will, my vision? And I always like to say small act because we think that everything has to be grandiose, and it doesn't. Every day we're living a purposeful life. Okay. The way we put food in our bodies is can be very intentional. The times that we choose to do that, the times that we choose to sleep, the times that we choose for quiet, the times that we choose for entertainment, all those things can be very intentional in our lives. Okay. And propel us or withdraw us in our lives in whichever way. Okay. But the important part is to notice where your energy is feeling natural versus things feeling forced. Okay. That's how the wind speaks to our cells. And that's just in the very basic way, being specific about certain things. That's why there's the one-on-one. I'm always open to that because that's a longer conversation. This is just really on the surface, right? Again, it's a springboard for getting you to dive deeper into aspects of your life that you want to pivot, change, enhance, investigate a little bit more, or certain things that maybe you didn't identify before, then you begin identifying those things. So it's just a springboard, a jumping off point, but definitely there are different tools, different communities, different modalities to dive a little bit deeper. So a lot comes from awareness, okay? Awareness is where we feel flow. Awareness is how we know our strengths, and it's also knowing what deflates us and our weaknesses as well, right? Where we're not as strong, where we're not as knowledgeable, right? So when we try to ignore certain aspects, it throws us out of alignment. Even if we're like ambitious and um ambition is something that can be short term, right? I don't know if you've ever been at an altar call at a church or whatever. So in that emotion and in that moment, you may be feeling a certain way. But what has to be done to actually stay in flow and stay in alignment with that doctrine is more than just what happens at that altar call and in that moment of emotion, right? So we can maintain ambition as long as things are going well and seem to flow. But when resistance comes up, our ambition, there's shots that are taken at the ambition, right? So it can poke holes in it, it could dissipate a little bit, maybe even altogether disappear, right? So even if we don't know our purpose, we can be aware of patterns and how it affects our moods. And we can be intentional about the energy and use it to build us rather than letting it just fall to kaputs. What happens to a house if you don't maintenance it? It falls apart, right? So being intentional is giving ourselves maintenance, intentionally maintaining our mind, our bodies, and our energy. Okay, even when it's not desirable circumstances. So I just want to close this session, was it session 3, with this affirmation. Affirmations to me are important because sometimes we do not understand and realize how we talk to ourselves, and affirmations can be a way to talk to ourselves. A lot of times I suggest that people, if you read the Bible, certain scriptures, writing those things down in your most high traffic places. Most people are in the bathroom to do some type of hygiene. People go to the refrigerator. People go in and out of their house, right? So putting it at your door to leave, maybe where you relax, is why I suggest people put up affirmations, but not just saying things, right? Also thinking about what actions align with what I'm affirming. Okay. So with this affirmation, it says, my will is not separate from divine will or inner will. I move with love, I move with purpose, and I move with clarity. So my true will fills my cells with flow. This is about being in alignment, not just with your inner self, but being in alignment and keeping that alignment in your external environment as well. So next week we'll talk about the rudder, which is about decisions and decision making and discernment. We'll talk about the 5-minute reframe activity in that week. Okay. Any questions, concerns? Shoot an email, Shay's Pretty Skinny at iCloud.com. And then, of course, you can make any comments on the video, jump into the Facebook group as well. Have a good one.